On behalf of the Jasper Chamber, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. So the way we normally do this, for those of you who've never been here, well, let's have a raise of hands of anyone who's never been to a legislative breakfast. All right, so a few new faces, and thank you for coming this morning, along with all of you who've been here before. We'll go ahead and let our state legislators say a few words about things that they are working on, and are we halfway, more than halfway through? All right, Monday they start the second half, so it's good timing here today. So they'll be able to tell us some bills that have progressed through, some things that they have their mark on. And then the other thing we'll do toward the end when they're finished talking is there are some papers and pencils at the end of each aisle. If you have a question, please write it down. Get the question, I'll pick up the questions, and then I will ask them the questions. So make sure I can read your handwriting and understand what you're trying to say. So, all right, I think we'll go ahead and start with Shane. Would you like to start and go ahead?
Okay, we good? Everybody hear me? Okay, so as Nancy said, my name is Shane Lindauer. I'm a state representative for District 63. District 63 encompasses portions of Du Bois, Davies, Pike, and Martin County. So I'm kind of the northern half of Du Bois County, over to Petersburg, Washington, and then it shoots over towards Shoals and Lagodi. This is my second session. I was caucused in to replace now Senator Mike Braun. As I've said numerous times, it's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of this and to be sitting here in front of you. I say all the time that 90% of this I thoroughly enjoy. There's a 10% that I don't, but that's like with anything. So I just want to thank you all for being here this morning. I've said this before, but I'll say it again as well. I think it's incumbent upon us as citizens to be educated and to know what's going on, whether it be local, state, or federal issues. I think our government works best when people are informed and know what's going on. So thank you all for being here, taking time out of your day, and participating in part of the process. So, as far as things that I've been working on, as we said, we're halfway through. For those of you not familiar with the process, so it was, I've got the number here, I think it was 700 and some bills that the House introduced, 600 and some I think that the Senate side introduced. Of those in the House, we passed 201, roughly 28% of the bills that were introduced on the House side. So that just gives you an indication of how many bills are introduced and never really even see the light of day. Some of those start working their way through and for whatever reason are terminated. But so about 28% of those bills passed. And again, just to give some indication, because this was kind of a surprise to me, most of those at the state level are completely bipartisan. So it was 75% of that 28% that passed with fewer than 5 dissenting votes. So it really is, there's just kind of a handful of issues that really kind of, can get contentious and cause some division, and those are important divisions, don't get me wrong. I mean, there's important issues that we debate, but the vast majority of the bills that come before us are, go through pretty quickly, pretty easily. Couple bills that I was working on and pretty excited about was a House bill, I think it was 1063, but it dealt with public servants. Specifically, the reasoning behind it was volunteer firefighters, rural Indiana, difficulty getting folks to sign up for volunteers. So we passed out of the House a bill that it was somewhat modeled after kind of a National Guard model is kind of what we had in mind, in that if you are a active member, and that's going to be determined by your captain, your supervisor, because it's not just open to volunteer firefighters, it's actually open to all public servants is the way the bill's written. If you are actively participating in those services, you will be eligible through Ivy Tech. Ivy Tech's been very gracious in offering basically tuition support to take classes to a degree. So hopefully it'll do two things. It'll help kind of skill up the workforce, get people trained in whatever career path they would like to choose or to go down, as well as hopefully entice people to sign up for the volunteer fire service or whatever it might be. I've talked to about 5 or 6 different volunteer fire services now, and the story is the same across the board, and it sounds like in other parts of rural Indiana, it's the same all across the state. That there 20, 30 years ago, there was a waiting list to become a volunteer firefighter, and now you've got to, they're going out and actively trying to recruit people. So that's a bit of a change. There are various reasons given for that, which I won't go into, but we're trying to hopefully stem the tide of that. So there's a bill that I just said, so that was one bill. There are a couple other bills that I was able to pass. I'd be happy to talk about those if you have questions. There was but most recently, a couple weeks ago, I passed a bill on qualified medication aids out of the House that's now going over to the Senate that will allow in assisted living facilities, skilled nursing facilities, it will allow QMAs to administer insulin. So again, it's just hopefully going to, with training. So let me say that. It's not a must provision. Each licensed facility will be able to allow their QMAs to administer insulin if they take the proper training, the proper schooling. So again, what we're trying to do is, my goal in that was to hopefully reduce some regulation to, again, scale up the workforce, and hopefully with the, nurses are in high demand, short supply as well. So rather than have them doing things that other people are capable of doing, a QMA would be capable of doing, it allows them to kind of practice within their scope of practice to a greater degree. So several of the bills we've been working on, I'll pass it to Senator Messmer. I'd be happy during the Q&A to answer any more direct questions that you may have. So thank you.
All right. Well, I had 12 bills that I had filed. 11 of them are moving. A couple of them got picked up into House bills. I think Representative Burton had a similar bill that I had, and his bill got moving. So the financial institution said, we'll wait and get Representative Burton's version coming over. We both filed it on behalf of the bankers. Senate Bill 160 deals with allowing fire departments to hire people within 50 miles of their municipality, whether they're in a contiguous county or not, because there's a lot of places you have little appendages of counties that stick out. Somebody could be 15 miles from the department they want to apply for, but they're not in a contiguous county. That got rolled into a Homeland Security bill in the first half of session in the House, and so the Fire Chiefs Association said, you can let that one go. That's coming over on a House version as well. The bills that I did author and then I had one that got heard in committee, and it was primarily just to make sure the governor had not announced his rural broadband grant program details yet. It was still something they were working on, and early in session we had on my Senate Bill 461. My bill would have specified, that the parameters that we laid out last year in House Bill 1065 on grants going to unserved, areas, making sure their program, indeed was doing that, because they really hadn't rolled it out prior to session. They came in and had their hearing and let them present their grant program, and it seemed to fall pretty well in line with the parameters we set out last year. So the chairman of that committee just decided not to take a vote on my bill, because the governor's plan was pretty well on track with what we were expecting. Senate Bill 162 was a bill that I filed that moved out unanimously out of the Senate, and it in dealing with the opioid addiction problem, it requires doctors to seek alternative pain therapy options first before in lieu of, or maybe as part of an opioid pain treatment program, but allows them to seek chiropractic care, physical therapy, osteopathic care, and occupational therapy to try to heal the body itself, rather than get somebody prescribed to opioids and potentially addicted. And in years past, the insurance companies were one of the main fighters on that issue. But I think they figured out it's cheaper to give people alternative pain therapy and heal them, rather than get them addicted to opioids and then have to pay for opioid addiction treatment programs later on. And they actually came in supportive of the bill this year, which was kind of nice. Another bill that I had dealt with, it was Senate Bill 230, and it dealt with a court ruling a couple years ago that prior to that, in what we thought our law said, it required every contractor on a job site to be responsible for their employees' safety and job site safety. And there was a court ruling a couple years ago in an appeals court that said the general contractor has full liability of all of his subs, regardless of whether the sub was at fault or not, and really kind of set the liability standards upside down. That bill just resets it and more clearly defines that each person on a job is responsible for their employees' safe behavior. That passed out unanimously as well. Senate Bill 231, it deals with clarifications in our labor law. If you're in a direct sales business, my wife's in Mary Kay, there's Amway, there's Avon, all kinds of direct sales companies, but make sure it's clear in our code that when you're one of those direct sales people, you're an independent contractor and you're not eligible for workman's comp or unemployment from your parent company, because there's no employee relationship there. And we modeled after 38 other states have done the same clarification in the law, and it models right after the federal standards on what a direct sales person is versus an employee. Senate Bill 459, we've got a base realignment commission that was established in 2005 right after BRAC, and they met, I think I did talk to Eric Cook, and they met one time in 2005 and haven't met since. And so we went through that section of code with our Office of Defense Development Commissioner, and I've got that restructured into a defense industry task force that, instead of being a defensive, BRAC group, it's more of a proactive, doing what we can to seek additional defense, spending to our bases and to our defense contractors. Passed out unanimously as well. Senate Bill 460, a pretty significant issue in trying to get rural broadband, out to unserved areas. NDOT had a program the last couple of years, and they've been pretty hard to deal with for broadband companies, because broadband providers were deregulated back in 2006, and so they don't fall under the pure model of a regulated utility. They are still regulated in many aspects except for their rate. But Senate Bill 460 allows broadband companies to get full access to highway right-of-way, with NDOT, without them have to pay any fees other than the normal permit application that every other utility provider pays when they apply for their right-of-way permit, and they give them full treatment, as a utility, when it comes to utility right-of-way access. And any state road or any U.S. route that's not a 4-lane improved with grade separation interchanges, broadband companies will be able to get into those just like any other utility company could. And the last 2 years, NDOT's been trying to roll out a program that the effect would have been charging them $1,500 a mile for state highway right-of-way access and $2,500 a mile for interstate access in urban areas. And when you look at the cost of rural broadband, it costs $25,000 to $30,000 a mile to put fiber in a long extensive stretch. If you amortize that over the life expectancy of it, and then you put a $1,500 per mile per year fee on top of it, it more than doubles the net cost for them to deploy that broadband. And if you're taking the most expensive, least density population areas to try to deploy fiber, it just made it totally impractical. So that passed out, headed on its way over to Representative Soliday, and he and I are going to meet Monday to kind of go over each other's bills that we've got. Senate Bill 551 I worked on with the prosecutors. That popped up out of a case here at home, and I always love it when legislation gets its roots from somebody at home that you're trying to help. We call it the Victims of Crimes Act, and really enhances protections for people that were victims of crime, either in domestic battery or sex abuse, and requires if somebody is somebody who's listed as a sex predator, I don't know what the right term is. Yeah, but if they don't register as a sex offender, and they get convicted of that, then their 10-year requirement of being a sex offender registry resets. If they go 5 or 6 years into it, they stop registering when they move. They get convicted of, and it has to be, they have to be taken into court for that. They get convicted, their 10-year period restarts. And there's been examples that they brought in that some guys had gone, 8 or 9 years, never registered, got convicted, but then there's no outcome for it. So they register for 1 year and then they're done. So this would allow that clock to restart within that, all within Senate Bill 551. Passed unanimously as well. Senate Bill 552 is the gaming bill that we passed last week, and the main crux of the bill. There's 2 casinos in Gary that are on the lakefront, and they want to do an intermodal site in that location. For that to happen, they wanted to put barge unloading. There's a 14,000-foot-long stretch where they could bring rail cars in and not have to decouple them to load on and off of barges. For that to happen, the boats have to go. Gary's been wanting to move those boats for about 15 years. Never really had a reason for that. With the in our state budget committee, met over there over the summer, looked at at the economic development that they're wanting to do in that area. So part of that will be moving one of those boats within the city limits of Gary, and then moving the other one to Terre Haute. And then there's a lot of internal changes and processes that we set up to make all that happen a lot, and to allow the Terre Haute site to be not only the person who owns the license in Gary now, but allow the other casino operators an opportunity to bid on that competitively. So we didn't want to just say, okay, owner, you get the, because that's a pretty big step in value for for that casino operator to have, and to just grant that to them legislatively. We felt like we had to set up a process to force them to compete with the other casinos for that Terre Haute location. We've got sports betting in that provision now. We amended in Senator Ford's sports betting provisions that he had been working on. In May, the Supreme Court struck down a federal law that said states can't adopt sports betting. Said states can regulate it as they want. And so Senator Ford had been working on that. We both had those 2 gaming bills in committee, and the chairman just amended them together when he heard my bill back in about the halfway point of session. That passed out this past week. And then Senate Bill 586 is just some updates to the Physical Therapist Practice Act. It hasn't been updated in 62 years, and a lot of things have changed. I did the Chiropractors Practice Act last year, and the physical therapist said, hey, how about next year you do ours? And that's always interesting when you get the medical fields, the MDs, the osteopaths, the occupational therapists, the chiropractors, and you try to get all of those different, because you kind of rechange the terminology, and everybody gets upset that you're infringing on their turf, and it takes a lot of time to pull all that together. But that passed out first half of session as well. I did want to cover some of the bigger items that we had worked on in the Senate. These guys get the budget the first half of session, and it kind of dominates the discussion, or at least the media headlines. As an overall, we had 636 Senate bills passed or filed. 218 were passed. That's about 34%. Probably at the end of the day, we'll end up with 200 to 250 bills in total. There's 201 House bills, 218 Senate bills. A lot of those many times are the same idea coming from both directions. One of those two, one of the House or Senate versions will, at the end, be merged together. And at the end of the day, we'll end up with about the same number of House and Senate bills that passes. It's funny how that happens, but I think our leadership says, okay, we got these issues moving, and they agree what to merge, and sometimes you might have 2 or 3 bills that end up in one bill. So the numbers will look, pretty close when we get to the end of session. We really had 10 key issues we were focusing on in the Senate the first half, and the House always has their priority list as well. But by subject matter, Senate Bill 1 does some significant improving to the foster care system. We've heard, and I've heard prior to session, a lot of complaints from foster care parents that they have no voice in court, and really, statutorily they didn't. Many times the family court judge would take input from Department of Child Services maybe from the CASA, representative, but rarely from the foster parents. And as kids, and also gives the foster parents, if a kid is in foster care, goes back to the, to their parent, to the home family, and then back into foster care, this bill would give first priority to the foster family they came from. Because the main thing, and requires, instead of DCS's priority being, always reunification, with the family, the number one priority needs to be what's in the best interest of that kid. Because jerking them in and out of foster care home, the worst thing you can do is have that kid go through that type of instability. And so we're hopeful it'll at the end of the day, the top priority should be what's the best interest of the kid, not what's best interest of the parents, because it just so, and that should, and there's other things in there to help just cut down on the expenses in that foster and DCS program that's gone out of control the last couple of years. The opioid epidemic, we always tackle it from three perspectives: prevention, treatment, and enforcement. And in the prevention field, we had two bills. One was my Senate Bill 162 on the alternative pain treatment program, and then Senate Bill 141 on a prevention side puts regulations for office-based opioid treatment providers to make sure that they're dispensing under the same standards as we have for normal pharmaceutical distribution of opioids. Puts them into the inspect system. Senate Bill 33 on the treatment side sets up the grant program. Last year we set up the statutes that set up allowed for the 9 treatment programs across the state, so every person would be within an hour of a treatment program. Senate Bill 33 sets up the grant programs to fund those. And then Senate Bill 519 toughens the standards on people who are dealing opioids. It allows a prosecutor to stack if you have multiple dealing violations within a 90-day period. On a lot of times if you sell in smaller quantities, they do that intentionally to keep the felony level down. It allows a prosecutor, in a drug sting operation, that if they get caught dispensing multiple times in 90 days, they can stack them all into one quantity level and raises their potential penalty phase. Senate Bill 362 on the teacher side of things, it allows a tax credit. It's not a tax deduction. We currently have a $100 tax credit for teachers that buy supplies for their classroom, and that bill would raise that to $500 per teacher. I think the average statewide is about $300 per teacher, per classroom that they spend. So taking that up to $500 should allow them to get reimbursed, through their tax refund for a much greater chunk of what they're spending in their classrooms. Senate Bill 127 allows schools to have a referendum just for school safety, and because right now they can do capital projects when projects are above whatever 8 or 10 million, whatever the mandated level is. I mean, we've got referendums for capital improvements. We've got referendums for operating if they need just extra money to cover teacher pay or other insurance expenses. We've got operating referendums. We've got capital referendums. This would be one that would just allow them, and if they do it under a school safety program where it's just school safety issues, hardening the school, better technology, more resource officers in every school building, whatever schools want to do within that school safety parameters that we've got, it allows them to have that referendum appropriation, for a 10-year period. The other two programs that we have are 7-year periods for 7 years for operating, and then the capital is just the one-time upfront expense. Senate Bill 2 deals with toughening standards for people who blow through a school bus stop arm, and then higher penalties for somebody who there was 3 kids killed in one family. They got hit by a driver up in northern Indiana from running past the school bus arm. And then it requires schools, if at all possible, I mean, it doesn't say, no exceptions, but they have to design their routes to where when they're picking up kids, they don't have to cross, they don't have to cross the line. They open the door, the kids, try to get them to enter the bus from the side of the road they live on. sometime that just might not be practical, but on state highways, I mean, not on city streets, but on state highways, try not to design your routes to have a kid have to cross the highway. Targeted tax relief for small business owners. We try to do things we can to make sure Indiana's, a pro-business friendly state, and part of that is for business personal property for small business owners. Right now, if you have $20,000 worth of desks, computers, equipment, whatever in your small business, you don't have to pay the local business personal property tax. And Senate Bill 233 would take that exemption from $20,000 to $40,000. Impacts about 28,000 small business owners across Indiana. Senate Bill 460 was one of my bills that I talked about earlier on the rural broadband access to the right-of-way. Senate Bill 552, my gaming bill, to let those boats move in Gary. Senate Bill 516 allows farmers to grow hemp in Indiana. In the federal farm bill this past year, they declassified hemp and anything under 0.3% THC, which you have to be classified as hemp. They're the same plant family as marijuana. Obviously, marijuana's got high THC contents, 20% plus. Industrial hemp is used for fiber and the seeds for CBD oil or hemp extract oil. And the Fed said, you can develop your own parameters, give a list of guidelines, or if you don't develop your own parameters, we'll give you parameters to adopt. Well, we decided to pick our own, and that passed through pretty solidly on our side of the bill. And then, the Senate Bill 551 on the Criminal Victims of Crimes Act. So. Looking forward to the House bills coming at us, and Steve, come on down. You could have come on down any time. We'll let Representative Bartels give his recap next.
Okay, well, thank you. I want to apologize for being late. Real quick, I think everybody kind of knows my background. My focus in the last year has been kind of the same since the beginning. I focus on what affects people first, local government, and then the states, the final. Kind of the big things this year for me is really watching the gaming bill. Obviously, I represent a casino and making sure that it's not a typical casino. A lot of people don't realize that it's not owned, the license is not owned by that company. The state actually owns it and kind of runs it, and so there's an agreement there, and just making sure that the local economy there doesn't get affected negatively, and keeping an eye on another big casino that now has 4 properties plus in the state of Indiana, and it's their number 2 cash producing casino in the United States, and so making sure that we keep an eye on that. Obviously, big for me is public safety. You'll see that I'm always watching the volunteer fire departments and how we can make sure we can enhance those. Reserve police officers, and of course, full-time public safety, EMS, and those kind of things. So you see a lot of those bills that I'm on and trying to make sure we focus in the right direction on there. Tourism, Mike Kirchhoff and I really worked on with the Lieutenant Governor this tourism bill, which does public-private partnerships. It's working for our economic development for the state of Indiana, and we took that same principle into tourism. So we're going to see some changes this next year in that's positive, and we can commingle some funds and get some advantages to that. A lot of things I'm looking at is less government, so you'll see me always trying to streamline government. This year my push was the Department of Health, so you'll see a couple bills that is actually trying to make it more efficient and how they do business. So, and with a couple of issues, a lot of people don't realize that we have a lot of septic system failures in the state of Indiana. We're really ranking pretty high on that. And so one of the things that there's some new technology out there to try to streamline Indiana to say we can bring in this new technology. That one, it's cheaper. A lot of these homes are affected are really elderly and low-income housing, so some alternatives there. The big thing in the beginning of the year was the North Spencer School Corporation finances with DLGF. It took a year or so to get that fixed, and so it looks like it's moving forward with no problems, and I know Senator Messmer will be carrying that one in the Senate. So education and teachers, we always, it seems like every year we're doing something with education. And so trying to get people to start realizing let's kind of slow down on what we keep changing in the education, let the teachers catch up. Obviously, big push is putting more money back into the classrooms, and there's some controversy with that a little bit, but I think it's the right thing to do is kind of, we as a state, and me personally, does not want to see us come back and get involved in those local decisions. So a lot of times when you hear this stuff about us as a state, legislators being against raises and teachers, it's just not true. It's really a local decision. We're providing more and more funding for the local school boards to provide teacher raises and those kind of things, and so we're making sure that we continuously do that. I am. And then, of course, the big thing that is the hemp bill. I really, as the new vice chair of ag, I really want to see this go through, and I think we're done real well. It's going to come through it's already been through the Senate, so I think it's going to be fine on the House side. It'll provide our farmers just an alternative, another option. It's in a new upcoming industry. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I know we want to do some questions.
Does anyone have any questions written down? Okay, let's just take a few moments if you want to write down some questions. We'll take a little break and go ahead and write them down and pass them over. Any else up here? Any other questions? All right. I'll just start with the one that's on top. It says, "Are you for term limits?" It's just a general question. Are you for term limits? So whoever wants to, I guess you don't have to answer it if you don't want to.
So this is something I've given a lot of thought to. I've kind of gone back and forth on this position, so that's a perfectly political answer, right? I'm on both sides of the issue. On one hand, the argument can be made that we have term limits already, right? I mean, you could vote somebody out. We're up every 2 years for us, every 4 years for Senator Messmer here. So. I think that is a valid argument. However, currently I kind of come down on the other side. I would prefer to see a term limit. I don't know exactly what that number is. I think once you're in there for a long time, it becomes difficult. Let me back up. I think there is value in being there a certain amount of time. When I look at where I was last year to where I am this year, as far as just comfort level, just knowledge of the process, knowledge of the bills, and being able to take in the information that's coming at you, it's night and day difference. So I'm sure next year and it'll be that much farther ahead. Having said that, me personally, and these gentlemen may disagree, I would prefer to see a term limit. I don't know, 8, 10, 12 years, something like that. Personally, that's kind of my opinion on it. So, but again, it's something that. I struggle with because, again, in the back of my brain, again, what I led with, an informed citizenry can always vote out any one of us up here at any given election cycle. So technically, I guess you could say we already have that term limit in place. So
yeah, I guess the states and the federal government that have full-time legislative bodies that pay a lot of money, people do anything they can to hang on to those positions, and I can see, but in Indiana we don't pay a lot, and if you pay any attention, we probably have 20 to 25% turnover every year, because people just, after a while you just get wore out, because it doesn't pay a lot, and it takes a lot of time, and it's considered part-time in its pay, but it's a year-round job. We're in session part-time. But I think the states that have problems, the bulk of the problems are the handful of states that have full-time legislatures, that they're not part-time citizen legislatures like we have. And since I came into the Senate, after 3 election cycles, we've got half of our people are new. And in the House, it's 15 to 20 new people every cycle, every 2 years. If I look back 10 years ago, there's probably, if there's a fourth of the people left that were there when I started, that's pretty normal. And you just don't see people doing the job that long anyway. And so I don't know that it's a problem here. And the problem when you have term limits, the guys that I've talked to in states that have it, you think it makes the process work better, but they said when you're in and you're term limited, it almost makes you more aggressive to get stuff done because you're on a short window. And so it maybe solves some problems of having, people that are in control of committee, committee areas too long, and even at the federal government, they don't have term limits, but they have limit on how long you can be a chairman. And that alone has caused, because once a person is a chairman of a congressional committee and then they're no longer eligible to be a chairman, a lot of them quit because, if they can't be a chairman and they're now just a rank and file, House member, they don't want to do it either. So, there's ways around it, even if you don't have, constitutionally required term limits. Our system works pretty well on turnover so, always open to the idea if we see, problems develop where we feel like it's needed. I wouldn't say no, but I just don't know that it's a problem here.
Yeah, I agree with Senator Messmer. The short answer is no. I don't agree in term limits, and I think Senator Lugar said it best. One of his seminars. There already is term limits. I'm elected for a 2-year term, and that's it. If the people don't want to elect me again, they don't have to. The other thing is it was a great comment he made. He said, it took me a term and a half to figure out all the terminology and where all the bathrooms were. And it was kind of a funny statement, but it's really true that once you learn the system and you become better at it, and now I can serve you, the people who voted for me, better. And that's the key. And if I don't do that job well, then somebody else runs again and vote me out. So that's kind of the short answer.
All right, now we have a question concerning veterans. Did any of the bills to help county service officers advance? Let's put this up here.
I'm almost sure we had a Senate bill.
I'm not sure who asked that.
Probably would have came to you, or your name would have probably been on the bill.
It's not. I am now. The Senate bill.
Whoever asked that,
I do recall something coming through on.
Okay.
Yes, I'll look it up here. But if any of you have a bill number, I can tell you. When you have as
it's
many.
It's either 164, 490, or 491 because I'm going to be on it.
Bills. So what was the 3 options?
164, 490, or 491. It's one of those.
All right, let's see.
So there is a Senate bill coming over and looking at increasing.
164 was survivor benefits, so that wasn't it. What was the next one?
490 or 491.
Yes.
Right, and also gives the option for if over 2,500 veterans in an area, there would also be the availability to hire part-time.
Yes, that was it.
So we're going to see that in the House this next session. And it's actually, I think we're going to be hearing it pretty quick this next week or two.
So it probably did advance that.
So it made it out of the Senate. It's now in the House.
491, I believe, was the number. Yep.
Okay, utility companies were able to get the IRC to limit solar panel credit net zero on the utility bill. Can solar net zero be resurrected to help the utility bills?
That was a Senator Hirschman bill a couple years ago. As far as the reimbursement rate, that's always up for negotiation. Hirschman put a 25% above wholesale, I think, limit on how much the repayment rate could be, and if that needs to be adjusted, there's every bill is always open to renegotiation and adjustment if that rate's not the right rate, and I don't know that he had any real statistical information to base it on, but absolutely, every session, every section of our code gets tweaked every year, so, and if that needs to be adjusted, we'd be open to that.
I'm a big fan of solar. I actually operate off solar, but I don't sell back. I have battery backups, and so I run my whole house off of solar. And so any advancement in that from a legislative standpoint, I'd obviously be for.
Okay, Senator Messmer, in your opinion, do you think the plant down at Dale will ever be built?
I have no idea. It's in its process, and I think we beat the heck out of that the last couple times we met, and it hasn't got an air permit yet. And if it does get an air permit, it doesn't have financing yet. So, I mean, we really don't have a lot of input on our side of the aisle. It's not a legislative issue that we would be dealing with. So, don't know.
All right. These two questions are kind of related to each other. House Bill 1625 has passed the House and is now going to the Senate. The bill requires all local units of government to prepare a housing study should they intend to adopt an ordinance that may increase or decrease the cost of housing even indirectly. This is an unfunded mandate and an extremely broad requirement. Cities, towns, and counties are opposed to the bill. Representative Lindauer and Bartels voted against the bill. It is sponsored in the Senate by Senator Messmer. What action will the Senate take on House Bill 1625? And then regarding that same House bill, why require housing studies? They are additional cost and extended timelines imposed on small municipalities and county governments, such as Du Bois, Pike, Spencer, Martin. What is the purpose of housing studies?
Well, I guess I met with the people that worked on the bill in the first half last week, and I'm meeting with AIM and the Association of the Counties next week to I guess the intent of the bill was to not pass ordinances that raise up the cost of workforce level housing. I think Mayor Spinner's been proactive in trying to develop workforce housing in his community. It's definitely a needed sector of our housing inventory within every segment of the state. That $150,000 to $175,000 house just isn't being built because the margins are too small, and I guess I can't tell you what's going to happen to that bill. I can tell you I'm going to listen to the people from the local government side of things and look at what was drafted, and if it can be fixed, it'll be fixed. If it can't be fixed, it'll just go away.
Any comment? Apparently you had voted.
Yeah. So I think the intent is, I think, what Senator Messmer said. Like we said, we voted against the bill. We were not, I don't want to speak for Representative Bartels, but it was never explained to me how it was going to directly benefit local units. And so that's why I ultimately voted against it. Having said that, I think the intent, as Senator Messmer said, was to help with that kind of market. I think that the author of the bill's intent is good. I didn't necessarily agree with it. I also think that he is open to it being worked with. It passed the House narrowly. And he has said as much that he's open to, having some more input on that and try to get it in a better place. So.
Yeah. And admittedly, the folks from AIM and the Association of Counties really didn't give the author, Representative Clear, much input on how to do the process any better. So, and when I talked to Brian Gould last week, I said, come in next week with. Look at the bill, look what was passed. Can we get to the intent of what they're doing in a way that doesn't, that just doesn't grind, local government to a halt? If it's impractical, if it's expensive, it isn't, but I said, can we get to the intent of what the author, wanted and do it in a way that, that is workable and if I can get some positive input and get it done to where it's a useful tool rather than just stopping any future ordinances. It's not. It doesn't require anything to be done on what's been on the books already. It would be a prospective look, but so I think they'll be a little more engaged.
So you're meeting with AIM and Mayor Spinner is the president of the AIM organization. So
meeting with their lobbyists. I believe it might be Monday. Monday or Tuesday, so Monday.
All right, we'll move on then. With regard to House Bill 1212, why are foreclosure sales being removed from newspaper advertising?
Yeah, so I did vote for this, and it takes away a mandate that the state has placed on local government, and that was the sole purpose for my vote. And you also see that these people that are doing this are now, it's all internet-based. I'm a paper guy. I love touching paper. I like books. I don't like reading off of this. But it was really a decision for me to vote for it was that it took a mandate off of local government, and they can still do that if they choose to. So it's now states out of that. That's kind of how it.
Yeah, so same thing. When this bill came up, I heard a lot about it, and I talked to every sheriff that I represent in the 4 counties that I represent, and they were all in favor of it. For that reason, it removes a mandate. They don't have to put it in the paper. They still can put it in the paper if they choose to. It basically just allows them some discretion at the county level to either put it in the paper or put it online. Some counties that may not work, and Martin County maybe is a good example where internet coverage is spotty in Du Bois County sometimes. So if a sheriff wants to do that, he or she can still do that. So.
Is Senate Bill 26 regarding medical malpractice actions a dead bill? 26.
10 seconds and I'll tell you. Since it's not blue on the list, it's dead.
It was reported that the legislature was looking at a total overhaul of Indiana's liquor licenses and sales laws. Is anything happening with this?
I did see Representative Smaltz has a comprehensive bill. What's in it? Is it 1518 maybe? I don't. Anyway, there was no Senate bills dealing with alcohol regulations. There was a pretty large House bill. Don't have any idea what's in it. I did just looking through the list of bills that are coming. I did see something, on alcohol permitting rules and whatever. So you guys might know a little bit more about.
I think to speak to the wording was radical overhaul or total overhaul. No, I didn't hear anything.
There's nothing.
That was a total overhaul from Representative
and his was probably just nitpicking through different rules on permit processes and I mean I wouldn't call it a radical overhaul. It was just kind of just going through different code sections and deleting things, tweaking things, cleaning it up. Yeah.
Just a quick comment. Someone that has 5 different permits, alcohol permits, we probably do need kind of an overhaul. Radical may not so be, but definitely an overhaul.
There was a Senate bill that dealt with, and it would applied. I mean, it was some stuff that they were doing at Huber Winery where they've got the winery, they've got the distillery, they've got convention space, they've got restaurant space, and the Alcohol Tobacco Commission said, we can't write you, a permit for operating a. The way they're set up, they have multiple layers of activities going on and allowing a lot of those functions to happen. They own all the components, but there's nothing that allows them to do an event that involves all of them, on their own property. And one of our bills we had, and it would probably, the net effect was to help Huber, but I'm sure with you guys at Patoka, with your out that your space outside, especially if you get in the distillation business at some point in the future, people that have multiple venues, French Lake Winery probably is going to be impacted. It was written to address problems with Huber, and ATC said we'd like to be able to write you a permit to have an event that involves all these, but we can't. It's not that we don't want to, we just legally can't. And so that was kind of a fix because of just the evolution of people that are in a lot of times in the wine business, end up in the beer business, end up in the distillation business, the bourbon business, and 20 years ago it just didn't happen. 10 years ago, but now and then as they have the different production facilities, and then they have retail spaces, and they have convention spaces and wedding spaces, and trying to make all that work together. I mean, I said, is that a radical overhaul? No, it's cleanup stuff.
I agree, and kind of the big thing too is the ATC's interpretation has changed as new commissioners come in, and you can just see all of a sudden that they're interpreting a law differently, and so a lot of this will add something to clarify part of that law, and it muddies the water in another section. So it does need some changes, but it's really sometimes it's more of an interpretation by ATC, and then we got to fight through those fights.
Just an example, people will ask, why don't we have wine in the beer garden at the Strassenfest? It's a separate license. You have the separate area for that. So same thing with the Wine and Jazz Festival at Huntingburg. That has to be separated, separate admission, so it makes no sense to the general public.
I'd love to see wine in the Strassenfest.
Yeah. Any certain kind. All right, so I mean, that could actually demand a big overhaul at some point, but maybe step by step to take care of it. For the next level broadband program, how will we make sure that rural DuBois County will get reliable, high-speed internet soon? Rural Pike and Crawford County has better options than DuBois County. Frontier currently provides service to some areas but has oversold the networks, and they are no longer reliable or high-speed.
Well, I have a little basis in internet since I started an internet company a long time ago, and we ended up selling it. But and we provided internet to Crawford County. So one of the things that I hate to see that broadband is going to have to at some point slip into some kind of regulated business, and everybody hates to hear that. I hate to say that as a legislator. I hate to have that as a business person, but it is a necessity. We have to face the facts, and I think that's why you're seeing these RMCs picking up the ball, because they have the infrastructure. One of the huge things about broadband is just billing. It's a costly process. It's already a fixed portion of their business, so it makes sense. The poles, everybody it's just logic stuff. They have the ability to stringline fiber on poles if they so choose to, if they're not going to bury it. The one thing that I did fight against on the House was on a grant procedure, making sure that the grants don't include operational cost. I'm completely against that. It should be for the expansion, not the operation of broadband. So there's a few big boys that kind of try to slip that into some grant procedures. So I try to make sure when I recognize that's not the right thing to do and fight against those kind of things, or it's infrastructure. So, I think that Indiana's going to have to potentially look at this as a utility at some point, and that's the only way we can gain access to this fiber that goes right by my door, and I can't gain access to it, so I have to get it from French Lick and pipe it. So somehow there's going to have to be some concessions on everybody to make this work for the betterment of the citizens.
Well, I think the governor's grant program, I mean, it takes the parameters we set last year in 1065 and make sure the priority goes to unserved areas, but it'll be up to people like Smithville or the RMCs, or people that are people that have the potential to deploy the service to the customers, to put together their program of what they want to do over the next year or two, how much it's going to cost, how much they're going to put in, how much they're asking the state for, and then Okra will evaluate those proposals, and the state's going to be offering grants to help get service to unserved areas. So will it take a year or two or five? We've got $100 million we're going to put in it from the state. I think Purdue did a study a couple of years ago. The cost to deploy broadband to every person in the state's about a $2 billion funding gap. Now the state's going to put $100 million. It'll be matched by $400 to $500 million from the providers, because we're estimating somewhere in the 20% matching grant would be the typical. But there's places where actually fiber to the home may never be possible. It's going to be a combination of wireless product, fiber product. mean, it's going to be all of the above, and our grant program is not technology specific. We let that solution come from whatever, and there might be technologies that develop in the next 5 or 10 years that we don't even, can't even envision now. The 5G, and you're starting to see, 5G service. I mean, that's 1 gig speed on your phone, but that's going to be, it's getting deployed in Indianapolis and I think Austin, Texas, and I mean a few, but it's expensive, and but over time, a combination of wireless and wired, and but over the past couple of years, allowing the REMCs to put fiber on their poles, they were prohibited from doing that until 2 years ago. Well, now we allow them to do that. So we've allowed the REMCs to be part of the solution. We're putting $100 million this 2-year budget cycle. I mean the goal would be to continue to do that, but along with that, there's the federal program, the CAF2 funding that's putting, I think, $60 million a year into it from the federal side. For still, there's 2 or 3 more years of that process, and that goes through Perry Spencer and Smithville and Frontier, and I mean everybody that's in that that pool, and that that keeps moving. That takes where there's already service, and it keeps extending it and extending it, and some of it's for upgrades and extending to the next closest bunch. So it's going to be all of the above approach. I wish we could fix it within the next year, but we don't have $2 billion laying around on the shelf to get that done either.
All right, this is a question related to teacher salaries and overall education expenditures, and just some points of information. According to this study, Indiana ranks 26 with teacher salaries after cost of living adjustments. Indiana also ranks 45th for all states related to pension plans for teachers after completing cost of living adjustments. Indiana's ranking on total K-12 public education expenditures in a 10-year period from 2005 to 2015 declined 12 slots from 22nd in the nation to 34th in the nation. Now, the question, do you support increasing overall dollars for public education and teacher pay beyond the current state budget recommendations of 2.1 and then 2.2 the following year?
That's quite a question. Yeah, I mean, as far as the support for the 2.1, 2.2, yeah, I mean, obviously we support that. Kind of an unexpected thing, as I think, as we came into this year, was the DCS issue. I don't know if you guys remember the numbers, but the three programs or 3 kind of areas took the vast majority, I think it was 86% or something like that, of the new expenditures this year in the state budget. So K through 12 education, the DCS program, and we've all heard the stories that have been going on there, and then Medicaid funding. So those 3 things took the lion's share of the budget. DCS was something that has really kind of come to the forefront in the last year, 2 or 3 years, I guess. There were some problems identified there, obviously, and excuse me, everyone is rightly concerned about what's going on there and how to fix that going forward. So there was a great deal of money put toward that, and so I wasn't part of Ways and Means as far as how those decisions were made, but. Unfortunately, there were, in defense of them, there were tough decisions that had to be made as far as where the new money is allocated, and so that's the number that those are the 2 numbers rather that they settled on, the 2.1 and the 2.2% increases. Again, a big chunk of that was eaten up by DCS and Medicaid. So I don't know. Somebody else.
Well, I mean, I think, you say 2.1, 2.2%, that's just nothing. Well, I think that still ends up about $600 million over the biennium that's additional money going to school. So we don't dictate teacher salaries within the budget. I don't think anybody wants the state to dictate teacher salaries within the budget. there, but I think the House did have a bill, and it was probably more of a guideline, to try to make sure that the schools are spending, I don't know, what was it, 85%? To actually classroom expenses. And some schools do a, really good job of prioritizing teacher pay within their, within the budget appropriation we give them, and some across the state, don't do so well. But, we don't tell schools how to spend it, and I don't think anybody, we constantly hear, you're taking away our local control, you're taking away our local control. Well, that'd be a pretty big taking away of your local control if we dictated salary scales. So I don't think there's any intention of doing that. Also, the 2.1 and 2.2% is not the extent of what gets spent on education. Just as happened in Northeast Du Bois, just as has happened in Bar Reeve, allowing operating referendums to supplement, what we pay. We allow them to, take it from local property taxes. Prior to the tax caps and prior to the state taking over, the operating expenses, schools could do that, without voter approval. And I'm still 100% supportive of if a school corporation, needs additional money and they want to go to the voters and say, we need an X amount of dollars more, and if it's 20 or 30 cents, per $100 to supplement what they get from the taxpayers locally, like they used to be able to do without asking for it. Now we just say, if you want it, you got to ask for it, and your community has to say, we're willing to pay it. I am completely on board with that. I love the support Northeast Du Bois and Bar Reeve. Both got high turnouts in their referendum elections and won by large margins because the people said, yeah, we support what you're doing. We know you've cut about as much as you practically can cut, and we're willing to pay more from our property taxes to help make up the difference. So that, and every school corporation in the state has that ability. I think Indianapolis is looking at, from the IPS schools has a several $100 million referendum, that they're going to pass and probably pass solidly this year to make up, but they pass about 75% of them across the state pass when voters take these operating referendums. That gives you more money than what the state appropriation is. And that is a big part of the tool we give schools, and I think it's very appropriate to do that. And schools with flat enrollment or declining enrollment, even if you're getting $100,000 more, you're getting more per kid. And just right off the front of my sheet here, Jasper's going to get. They're going to go from $6,300 a kid to $6,465 to $6,597. The dollars per kid is going up, over the next two bienniums, next 2 years of the biennium. But in schools, if their enrollment is going down, even if their per kid is going up, it's tough to make it work. But we do there are other tools with the referendum process that allows you to supplement that. If the dollars per kid, even if it's more, and I could guarantee every school in my district is getting more per kid over the next 2 years. Could guarantee it without looking, but they may not be getting more money if their enrollment is declining, and we do want to give school corporations the tools to deal with that and support that totally. And we do have typically outside of this, this appropriation, on the per kid, there's typically some, we've had in the past few budget cycles, and I'm not sure if there's a House bill that allows for teacher grants above and beyond the baseline, but we've had it in the past few budget cycles. I would support that again. I don't know what the dollar per teacher is, but historically, the last two budget cycles, we've allowed more money to go to teacher performance grants that goes directly to the teacher's salary. Does not go through this appropriation process. We've done it in the past two cycles, and I would support that again as well.
Here's kind of a follow-up question. We could tie this in. What is the status of the governor's initiative to use reserve funds to pay down teacher retirements to free up money for teacher pay increases? And if that is, whatever the status of that is, how will this work if teacher salaries are set by contract at the local level with the local school districts?
Well, I'm pretty sure that was in the governor's budget, and I'm pretty sure it's part of the budget that we're going to take some of our reserve funds. And when you use reserve funds, you've got to do it to pay for one-time expenses, because otherwise that reserve fund is not a reserve fund. It's just part of your ongoing expense. And if we pay down, I think, what is it, $140 million of pension liability that's paid for, by the local school corporations, and you free up, for them going forward every year, money in their normal budget cycle. If you free up future expenditures, for them by the state paying down some of that long-term obligation, then it does free up, and it's not going to be thousands of dollars per kid, but if it's a few $100s per kid, if it gives the schools more money within their budget process to work with, because you freed up future expenses for them, that is in the budget. It'll stay in the, as far as I know, that purely intention for us to keep that proposal in. When you can pay down expenditures with the budget surplus, knock down a one-time expense, and save everybody money going forward, it's a good thing, because it will give them more money to work with. And I would say, based on our schools around here history, if they had more money to work with, they'd pay their teachers more money with it.
And I just, real quick, a couple on the question we had a minute ago, where there were a couple points. The Indiana's 40 or 26, I think, teacher salaries after cost of living adjustments. That struck me because according to the NEA, National Education Association, we're 9th in the country after cost of living adjustments, not 26th. Also, I think one of the points that Indiana's ranking on total K through 12 public education, we dropped. I'm not sure what that's based on, unless it's based on a percentage, and it did drop by percentage. I think last year we were almost 52% of the state budget was toward K through 12 education. That did drop if you just look at that, side by side. Now it's at 50%, but it's because, again, going back to DCS, there was such a large increase in DCS funding that by percentage, it looks like that percentage dropped. Like we're not giving as much money, to K through 12 education, but it was actually, I'm trying to find the numbers here, $611 million new dollars in K through 12 education over the biennium. So it has been increased. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there.
Senator Messmer said, he kind of alluded to this $140 to $150 million one time. My understanding, I want to make sure my number's right, but you're basically the school corporations are paying about 7.25% interest, so to speak, and it will drop that to 5.25. So, how much does that mean across the state? Nobody could answer that, but locally, each school corporation will have these new dollars just because of this one-time dump. Going back to some of these other questions, so I find this extremely important, so important that I did an educational summit last year, and I'm planning to do one every year. And so what I did is I actually had every one of my school corporations' contracts. I have all their teachers' salaries, and I kind of reviewed that. And we sat down together in a big room and kind of said, here's what the state says. The state looks at this and says, here's your support staff, and you've increased your support staff. And if you don't ask these questions locally, it seems like we're spending more money on support staff. And so, that didn't make sense to me because I know my school corporations are pinching every penny. And so what I've seen is, and try to convey back to the state, we're not like everybody else in the state of Indiana, at least in my district. You see these school corporations actually will hire 2 people as support staff and not teachers to help the teachers out. And so you're sitting there and you're like, well, that makes sense. They're getting more towards the students, more one-on-one, and they're doing it in a manner that we may, as a state, don't look at and say, well, you're increasing your support staff. And they're doing it what makes sense for them. And so I'm real hesitant on the state coming in and dictating, what you should do locally. And so I like this 85-15. I like it because it says that if you want to cross that line and do some more capital expenditure, that's fine, but everybody needs to know what you're doing. The local community needs to know, so that the state can say we want to make sure we focus all the dollars to the classroom, the teachers, and the students. And so I support that, and I think this is a good initiative from the governor, and this one-time payoff is huge for local school corporations.
All right, well, we have one question left, and it starts with the comments. Senators Messmer and Houchin, and she's not here today, but we'll relay that to her. Thank you for the work you do in the best interest of all Hoosiers. You both recently authored Senate Bill 613, a bill that allows at least 2 more types of loans to be made at rates far above what is now felony loan sharking at rates greater than 99 and 192%. How is this not usury, plain and simple? I think that's the word. And Representatives Lindauer and Bartels, how do you intend to vote on this bill? So you want to comment on Senate Bill 613?
Okay, well, Senate Bill 613, and it's a legitimate question. The current, for people who have credit below 580, which is about, I don't have the breakdown across Indiana, but across the country, that's 1/3 of the population has no access to credit. People can't get a credit card, could never get a bank loan, can't even get what is the companies that are like Springleaf and Personal Finance. They have no option to credit. Their only option that they have is a product called 2-week payday loans. And those payday loan programs are at a 391% APR. And you say, well, gosh, how can you pay 391%? Well, it's a $605 maximum product, and you pay it back within 2 weeks. And if you take the full 2 weeks with the application process, loan cost, and the percent service fee that they charge you, the $80 repayment that you pay back in 2 weeks calculates out. If you did it over, if you rolled that and rolled that and rolled that and rolled that over a year period, which you can't, would be 391% annual percentage rate. Now, if I borrow $100 from you today and I pay you back $101 tomorrow, the federal requirements for APR calculations would be 360%. But is $1 paid back on $101, would you call that usury? Well, using that definition by that statement, yes, it would be. And so when you look at the current payday product, that's only access to a loan product that they have. We've got 2 subprime products that were added to consumers' choices, and the first one would be what we call a consumer installment loan. That would be that picking up at $605 up to $1,500, and allow that to be repaid out over a 12-month period, 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And if you took it to the full extent of the 12-month period, the APR, which it's, with the service fees added to it and the percentages, drops it from 391% to 192%. So it cuts it in half. And then the other small dollar installment loan product would be up to a 4-year product from anywhere from $0 to $4,000. And in all these products, you can't have more than one at any one time. The payday loan product is not reported to the credit bureaus, does not allow you to build any credit history. All 3 of the products, either payday loans, consumer installment loans, or small dollar loans, they're all unsecured loans, which means they have no collateral. There's no car title that you take and get your loan, and if you don't pay your loan, the bank or the credit institution gets that back. It's purely money that's loaned, with no collateral used for it. But the other 2 products that are in that bill do get reported to the credit bureaus and do allow a person to build credit to get from, a subprime, a sub 580 credit score, to get them, to build credit to where they could go to Springleaf, or they could go to Personal Finance, or they could potentially qualify for a credit card, or they could go to a traditional commercial bank. If you don't get yourself above a minimum credit score, you never get beyond loan sharking, you never get beyond tribal lending, you never get beyond, offshore internet, finance options that are way above the payday loan product. And so the 2 products that were added, and there were some changes to the what they call the UCCC, the Personal Finance, Springleaf type product, programs, to allow them to go up to $15,000 and up to a 7-year period, and those are a 36% capped product. So I mean, we have enhancements to the normal Springleaf products to allow them to to loan more money, and those are collateralized. The UCCC, the Personal Finance, the bank products, the UCCC products are collateralized. The other two products still are not don't require collateral to get them. They are at a higher rate, but if your choice is 391 or higher, the other two products are cut that rate in half down for each one. Do allow the consumer to build credit, and do allow them to then get into more traditional banking products by building a credit rating above the minimum cutoff that 1/3 of people across this country don't have today. So is it higher than any of us in this room would probably ever want to go apply for? Yeah. But if you have no credit and you have a transmission that goes out, or you have a furnace that goes out, or a washer and dryer that go out, or a water heater that goes out, what do you tell them people? And I'm sympathetic as anybody in this room to people in that segment of our population. But we had two groups that came from consumer advocacy services, and the demand for this product across the state is about $1 billion market. And there was a program in Fort Wayne that has a $1.5 million revolving loan fund, and one other program, I can't remember which other community they were in, had $500,000. So we have two, through social service agencies, there are a small amount of products available at low interest rates for customers, but nothing even remotely close to filling the demand. And so do you tell these people you have no choice but tribal lending, payday lending, or offshore, internet lending, or the local loan shark? I mean, what do you tell these people other than, try to give them something to give them a less costly product and something that does build their credit history and allow them to then go to things that you would consider would be traditional lending that most of us, probably nobody in this room can relate to, but it's the reality of what a lot of people face every day. So it's not a perfect bill. I filed the bill. I didn't have time to work the bill. I had too many other things that I was working on. So senators, they took that bill over. And if the consumer advocacy folks had the products available that they could offer to people at little or no cost, then they'd put these people out of business. And so I challenge the people that write that note, that slam me for that, with that comment, come up with $1 million or $500,000 within your own agency and offer that to your people that are coming into your group, and nobody would ever have to go to people like this to meet their everyday needs. But it's not out there today. So
I guess the question is, how do I intend to vote on the bill? It's a 68-page bill, and I'm just seeing it. So the last thing I'm going to do is commit one way or the other at this point. I'm new, but not that new. But I do agree. I mean, we did have a similar bill last year that looked at some of this stuff, and this is way out of my area of expertise. I will admit that right off the bat as well. But I think a lot of stuff that Senator Messmer says resonates. I mean, there's kind of two extremes here. What do you allow to happen? For people that are in that unfortunate situation to get loans and allow them to fulfill an emergency that they may have in their lives. And is it abused? Yeah. There are obviously times when it's abused, but again, it's also I'm kind of wired at grown men and women should also have that ability to make their own decisions to a degree as well. And so that's also part of my I guess political DNA, if you will. That as long as everybody's on the up and up, I as a consumer know what I'm doing, know what I'm purchasing, I'm not being misled, then that's on me as well. So I think there's an element of personal responsibility that we have to look at when we talk about this issue that I think gets overlooked. We just point at the bad actors and say, look at them, look at them, look at them, and instead of and again, I feel for people who are in that situation, but again, nobody is forcing people to make those choices either. So I hope that doesn't sound too callous, But that's kind of where I come down on it as well. So.
From my standpoint, in looking at this, obviously the same as one of the things you need to know is that at the beginning of my political career at the state, I started trying to read everything. I realized don't read it until it's the week before because it's going to change 100 times before we get there. So I was trying to read the digest. But my philosophy about this is this. I don't want to see loan sharking. I think that we want to see it regulated. The state should regulate this. I think that somehow it should be to help in the regulation is that they can get some kind of a credit rating to help build them back. And I believe that there's some responsibility, as Shane said, that they're going to have to pay more because there's nobody else out here doing it. So I think the state's in a good position to say we want to regulate it. We want to make sure they get some credit and have an option.
All right, were there any more questions that came down the aisles? So I guess not. I do want to take this opportunity this morning to thank our state legislators for being here this morning, for sharing their input onto what is happening at the State House this year, at least halfway through. And we'll be attuned, of course, to see what happens through the next several weeks. Or when is the end of the session? Okay. So you have quite a few weeks left to go yet. So again, thank you this morning, and thank all of you for being here today.